Heavy Metal Detectors Podcast is brought to you in conjunction with and inspired by the Heavy Metal Detectors Facebook group. If you are looking for a place to connect with other detectorists in your area, visit the Heavy Metal Detectors Facebook page and join a group in your state. Start sharing your latest finds, post tips, and ask questions with those in your area. Just search Heavy Metal Detectors on Facebook. Enjoy the fun. You'll be glad you did. And here's your host of the Heavy Metal Detectors Podcast, Sydney Covey.
And welcome to the Heavy Metal Detectors Podcast. On today's episode, we have a special guest. We have Adam Kearley. Adam dabbled with detecting as a child and returned to it 30 years later after watching a friend's YouTube channel. Being a keen video editor, he soon created D-Tekt Sussex, a YouTube channel of his own, which is documenting his journey from early swings to earning a coveted place on the Nokta worldwide field team and beyond. Adam detects the fields, parks, and beaches of Sussex in the UK and is known for adding high production value to his weekly videos. Adam, how are you doing today?
Hey, Sydney, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. How are you?
I'm doing good, and thanks for being on the show. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Not to overlook the new history that's coming up in your area here soon on May 6th with the King's coronation.
Indeed, yeah. History being made right in front of us.
Right. So tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel, D-Tekt Sussex, and kind of how you got started and how you enjoy doing the channel and being a part of the metal detecting hobby.
Sure. So D-Tekt Sussex has been going since September 2019, so just over 3.5 years. And really it's a way for me to document my metal detecting adventures. So I make a new video every single week. I've managed to put out a new video every week since September 2019. And normally it's a metal detecting hunt. So I'll go out to one of my locations or a local beach, or I'll go to a metal detecting event or a weekend rally. And I'll produce a video of that specific hunt, and I'll show off everything I find in the order that I find it. And hopefully present it in a way that's entertaining, and hopefully that will help people learn a little bit about the hobby as we go. When I started the channel, I'd only been metal detecting for a couple of months. I'd only been out a few times. So when I say that the first episode is early swings, it really is. I was really a novice on that first video. But if you watch my videos from episode 1 to where we are now, which is nearly episode 200, you can see my progress from start to finish. So it's really good for beginners to follow that kind of progress and see what's possible in the hobby.
That's amazing. I watched a lot of YouTube videos when I was starting out to not only learn about which machine I wanted, but how to, the techniques and the things needed to metal detect. So it's really amazing and really great that you're showing that from beginning to all the way through. And then being a part of Nokta's field team. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's that sort of came out of the blue. I'd only been doing the channel for about 1.5 years. I'd moved up to the Simplex, Nokta Simplex, just over a year before that. Had pretty much mastered that machine fairly quickly. I produced a few tutorials on it, and I think I just got their interest, got their attention a little bit with my presentation style, because it's easy to follow, easy to understand. And as I learn things, I share what I learn on the channel as well. So people tend to learn with me. I got the place. There's 3 of us in the UK who are Nomads. Most countries have 1 or 2 Nomads, but because metal detecting in the UK is quite a big hobby, they wanted a couple more. So there's actually three of us here in the UK. And it really just entails using the Nokta equipment on videos, obviously showing it off, attending events, weekends away, weekend rallies, that kind of thing, and also having a bit of an online presence. So if anyone needs any help or support, either with the Nokta gear specifically or with metal detecting in general, that's something we can provide, and we can look out for posts online and just help people out that way. But yeah, it's a really great position. We do get the latest gear as well. Not to do as a bit of a thank you for what we do. They do send us the new toys as they come out. So yeah, I've got the Legend last year when that came out first off. So yeah, it's a great position. I consider myself very lucky to be doing that, and I've been in a position now for just over 2 years. It's going great guns.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be definitely would be a great honor. Being able to connect and do the things that allows you to do. Now, can you discuss what some of the pros or cons or some of the difficulties may be when it comes to filming while you're detecting?
Sure. I've always had an interest in video production. I did a little bit at college, and I've dabbled a little bit as I was sort of between college and here, really, just in video making. As sort of digital cameras came out, video making and editing became a lot more easy and accessible. And I've just been playing with editing and things over the years. So making a YouTube channel was something I was always looking at doing at some stage, but just couldn't find the right topic. But it does pose some really challenging tasks when trying to film a video outdoors. You need to think very carefully about the camera that you're using and where that camera is going to be when you're filming. Some people will have someone out with them filming them, just handheld camera, which is a great way to do it if you've got someone there to do it with you. Some people have a small tripod and they put it down on the ground next to the hole, and they'll be able to show things off that way. The way I prefer to do it is I get a harness that goes on the chest and has a little mount on the front, and you can put either an action camera like a GoPro or a cell phone on that mount, and you've got it right in front of you, and it gives the viewer almost a first-person view of what you're seeing. So as you're putting things out of the ground, your viewers are seeing it as you're seeing it for the first time. So they get that kind of first-person experience with it. The biggest challenge is probably audio. Getting a good enough sound outside is very, very tricky. Quite often you'll be on grass, which will absorb sound. So you need to have a really good mic that will pick up, not just pick you up, but will also cancel out the wind sound if you're outdoors, especially if you're detecting on a beach, because the winds on the beach will be a lot higher than inland. So the microphone I use is made by Rode, so it's quite a good quality one. It clips on to the collar. It's a lavalier mic, and it has what they call a dead cat. I'm sure you'll know what that is. It's like a furry muff that goes over top of the microphone, and it just helps to cancel out the wind. The best audio quality you can get is really, really important. The worst thing you can do is watch a video and just have wind noise coming through the entire 20-minute, 30-minute video segment. It's very off-putting for the viewer. So I focus on the camera. As I say, I use my cell phone and microphone. The other thing I like to do in my videos, especially at the start, is I try to do some what they call B-roll. So not necessarily detecting and finding things, but I do some cinematic shots, usually slow motion shots, just showing off the location and the machine that I'm using that day to give people a sense of where I am, what I'm doing. And I set that to a bit of music, and I say just sets the scene. So yeah, when I arrive at a location to film, these are the things I'm thinking of: camera setup, microphone setup, make sure I've filmed a little bit of B-roll, make sure I'm ready to film a little piece to camera, and then I'm filming from the chest as I'm detecting and finding my finds, and just describing as I'm going what I'm doing and what I'm finding.
Awesome. And do you find that having that camera mounted to your chest impedes your swing speed or gets in the way at all when you're detecting?
I don't find that it does. You do need to be a little bit aware of it, especially if you're in very rough terrain or if you're detecting around rocks, that kind of thing. Quite often, a normal swing would be fine, but if you're angling your swing a little bit to get around some rocks or go up a slight bank, that kind of thing, it can impede it a little bit. So yeah, you do need to be a little bit aware. But after a few times out, I very quickly got used to sort of twisting my chest a little bit so I can, move my arm out a little bit and just detect out that way. So you do learn maybe some slightly unorthodox ways of coping with having that camera on your chest, but it's in a fairly central position. It doesn't really get in the way with most things. The thing that does get in the way the most would be the microphone cable. So I do need to make sure that's not dangling or make sure it's tied up somewhere, because otherwise it will get caught, especially on the arm cup on the detector as I'm detecting. So that's probably the hardest thing to manage.
Gotcha. And I think that's in any kind of recording, you got to watch your cables and your equipment and make sure they're out of the way or not in a position that impedes anything. Being in the UK, there's a lot of history, medieval times, all the way through. There's just rich in history. What's some of the coolest things you've found so far?
Sure. I've actually had a really good couple of weeks, the last few weeks. I found some of the best finds I've ever had in the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks. If you go onto the channel, you'll see the videos of me finding them. Really, really exciting stuff. Where should we go for first? The most recent one I found was actually a bucket list coin for me. It was on my farm permission. I call it my farm permission. It's quite a varied location. It's the oldest thing I found there, and it's a silver Charles I hammered sixpence. And if you don't know when Charles I was, that's early to mid 1600s. So quite old. And 3.5 years doing the hobby, I haven't found a hammered coin. If you're in the UK, that's fairly unusual. Most of the people you meet, if they've been doing it for a year or two, will probably have found a hammered coin or something very similar. So it's been top of my bucket list for a long time. So I was really, really pleased when that came out of the ground a couple of weeks ago.
That's an awesome find. Here in the States, unless you're in one of those areas that were the original 13 colonies, 1700s is hard to find. Most of the stuff, we shoot for is around the 1800s.
Sure. The most amazing find I've had, and it was the week before I found that hammered coin. I went away to an event here called Detectival, which, as the name sounds, it's a detecting festival. Happens twice a year, and I was away camping at that event, and I found a nice little silver William III coin on the first day, a couple of gold gilded buttons. But on the second day, I pulled out a Roman coin. Absolutely beautiful Roman Numus coin, Constantine II, and I took it to the finds officers who are on site to identify the finds that you have, and they dated it to 322 AD. So that's a 1,700-year-old coin. Really, really good detail on it. Very, very high detail. Quite a rare coin to find. And it even had a very small hole punched through it on one side. We think that after the Romans fell, the fall of the Roman Empire, someone after that, possibly a Saxon, has taken a liking to the coin, punched a hole through it, and worn it as a necklace. So you haven't just got Roman history, you've also got potentially Saxon history, and that coin's been repurposed for something else later on. So that is my best ever find, and that was only 2 or 3 weeks ago. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased to have found that.
Yeah, that's definitely amazing. Like you said, here in the States, we don't have the potential to find that kind of history, and to get something like that out of the ground. Just shows how much this hobby can bring and how much fun it is.
Absolutely. The other side to it is I do a lot of beach detecting, so I do find some more modern finds as well. And I think my favourite find there was a couple of years ago now. I was down on the beach locally to where I am here, and I found a silver ring made by Pandora. Not the most expensive ring in the world. Had a few cubic zirconia stones in it. Looked very nice. I put a video out having found it. Very pleased that I'd found it on the beach. And somebody who watched my video, who knows me and who's local, remember seeing that ring on a Facebook post about 8 months previously, amazingly. Just a local Facebook post saying that they'd lost the ring. And we managed to trace back the owner, and it turns out they had come down to the south coast where I am to visit a friend 8 months previously in the summer, and they'd lost the ring. It was their engagement ring, so meant an awful lot to them, and they'd lost it about a kilometre up the beach. It bounced around in the sea all that time, landed on the beach. I found it with the detector, and happily was able to reunite that person with their lost engagement ring. So although the history is fantastic, and obviously we love the history, being able to do something like that with modern finds is just as much fun and just as rewarding, I think, as part of the hobby.
I agree. Our last guest on the show, he went on vacation to Florida, found a cell phone that someone had lost 6 months prior. It had been underwater, and he was able to return that to the owner. So that's a big part of the hobby, is being able to help people find stuff they've lost. And a lot of times it helps you gain permissions into new areas to detect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Along with that history and the learning and putting your show out there to and people following you from the beginning till now, what's one of the things that you learned early in the hobby to make you a better detectorist?
I think it's learning that you never stop learning. It's a hobby where I think if you did this for 50, 60, 70 years, you wouldn't learn everything there is to know about it. And the sooner that you can realize that and recognize that, the quicker you'll slow down a little bit, and you'll start learning things piece by piece rather than running ahead. I think that's something I learned fairly quickly. My first machine was very basic, and I learned that very, very quickly. So moving on to something a bit more complicated gave me that sort of learning curve, a steep learning curve to improve. And since then, I've never stopped learning. And it is a hobby of learning. It is a hobby where you just continue to learn both technique and the technology and the systems that you use to find the stuff, but also in the history as well, and the types of metal and how to treat them and clean them and look after them. I've always had a keen interest in the history, but was never able to sort of retain enough information to be an expert on the history. So as I find things like the Roman coin, like the hammered coin I found last week, that gives me something physical I've got in my hand that I can then go onto the internet or ask friends about and learn about that specific period of time. So yeah, it's all about the learning and knowing that you're never going to learn all of it, but the fun is to continue to try and push forward and learn as much as you can.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. Along with that, you mentioned cleaning and preserving your finds. How important is that when you do find something to make sure you clean and preserve it properly?
I think it's very important. It depends what you're finding and where you are, but if you are finding historical items, especially for me, coins, I love finding coins. It's important once it's out of the ground to make sure it's preserved and looked after well. You can lose the patina on them. You can damage them quite badly. I had a coin I found very early on, maybe 3 or 4 weeks into the YouTube channel. This bit wasn't actually on the channel. I found the coin on the video. It was only a farthing. It's a pre-decimal coin. We don't take them here in the UK anymore, but it wasn't particularly old or valuable. But I found this coin, and I was very new to it. I didn't know what to do with it. I asked a friend who wasn't a metal detectorist, but just had a few ideas about cleaning metal, and they suggested a few ideas. So I tried one of them, and I ended up pretty much melting the coin. with the acid. I can't remember what the compound was, but I used a compound on it, and it basically melted the detail on the coin or clean away. So what you use to clean the items is important, but once they're out of the ground and they're in contact with the air, they can, depending on the metal, they can oxidize, they can rust, they can degrade. So yeah, it's important to make sure, especially if it's an old coin or an important coin or a valuable coin, to make sure you treat it well, make sure it's preserved well. And every coin is different, every age is different, every metal is different as to how you treat them. I use what they call a composite cleaning pencil, which is a little, almost like a mechanical pencil, but it has composite nibs inside, and you can use that to get some of the hard crust off of some of these coins without damaging it. And along with that comes a kind of wax that you can preserve the coins with. So you just rub the wax in. Once that wax is on, the air is not going to get to the coin, and you can put it in a little case and keep it safe and display it without worrying about it degrading or corroding over time.
The Heavy Metal Detectors Podcast is sponsored by Metal Detecting Stuff. Check out Metal Detecting Stuff for all your metal detecting needs. Stocking dealer that offers competitive pricing with personal and excellent customer service before and after your purchase. Visit metaldetectingstuff.com for all your metal detecting needs. And Adam, how soon would you say it is, or how soon after you get home after your day of detecting should you clean and preserve your finds?
It should be as soon as you can. I mean, it's not a race against the clock to get it done perhaps the same day. But certainly within a few days, maybe a week or so, it's a good idea to do something with that coin, give it a clean, at least get any dirt and debris that's on it off of the coin, and get it into some kind of a condition where it's not going to be in contact with the air, either using some of the wax I mentioned or just getting it into a small coin case. I used small plastic disc cases with foam inserts that you can put in to keep the coin safe in a little capsule, in a little environment there, so that you're reducing contact with the air as much as possible. So even if you can't give it a good deep clean and preserve straight away, at least you're reducing the chances of it getting damaged or wearing. So it's not necessarily something you do the second you get home, but it's something you should do fairly quickly, within a few days, I think.
I would agree. The sooner you can get that dirt and stuff off that metal and get it out of the air, the better chance you have of protecting it from further damage. And now changing gears up and kind of getting away from that subject and getting back toward the beginner detectorist. Someone that's just got their first machine, getting ready to go out for their first time, what's some advice that you could give that person to where maybe they don't get as frustrated going out that first time?
Sure. I think the first thing to do is not expect to find anything on the first few times out. It's going to be a learning curve. If it's the first time you've used a detector, you're going to be getting used to buttons, you're going to be getting used to settings, you're going to be getting used to sounds, you're going to be getting used to terrain, you're going to be getting used to swing techniques and just working on building things up. So I think don't go out expecting riches on your first hunt, but take your time, read the manual for the machine before you go out at least once, and pick out the main functions and the main settings. If your machine's got more advanced settings like, say, bottle cap rejection, ion filtering, that kind of thing, don't worry about those too much to start with. Just stick with the basic settings: sensitivity, ground balance, just the very, very basic bare bone settings, modes if your machine's got it, and just go out and just get used to the feel of the machine, get used to the sound that it makes when it goes over targets, and just start getting used to the hobby and how the movements go. I think if you go out expecting to get riches very quickly with metal detecting, most cases you'll be disappointed and be put off. So don't go out expecting to get anything good or expensive or old. Just go out and enjoy being outside and using the machine and starting your learning journey with that machine and with the hobby.
And would you suggest those first, maybe 5-10 hunts to dig every signal that you come on?
I think so. Yes, definitely. If you do that, you'll quickly learn the sounds that you don't want to hear. The iron tones, for example, you'll learn what that sounds like. You'll learn to associate the tone and perhaps a reading on the screen if you're looking at that as well, with a particular type of target, and then you can make better decisions as you go on as to what you dig and what you don't. But again, with metal detecting with machines, it's always a learning curve. You'll get used to a particular sound or signal, and you'll always be surprised with what comes up. So digging every signal is always a good idea unless you push for time. But yeah, certainly when you first start out, dig as much as you can. Maybe even take a little notebook with you and maybe just describe the sound that you heard and the target that you found. Maybe write down the VDI number if your machine has that, and just make a few notes that you can refer to next time. I think that's especially important if you're not going to be going out on hunts close to each other. Like me, I go out every single week, so the last week is still fresh in my mind. But if you were going to go out on a metal detecting hunt and then maybe not go out for another month or month and a half, there's a good chance you'll have forgotten what you came up with last time. So I think having a little notepad to hand as well, just to keep a note of what you find and what the kind of signal you had for that find was, is really going to be beneficial for any beginner.
I totally agree. With the weather and stuff here in the States and jobs, and some of us don't get out and get to detect as much as we'd like to. So that's an excellent point to make sure you're keeping note of your finds, where you found them, what your machine's doing, the sounds, just so you can keep a record and keep your mind fresh each time you go out. Speaking of that, when you get a new permission, what kind of research do you do on that piece of property before you go out, and how does that determine kind of how you set up where you're going to detect?
The research is a lot of fun. I quite enjoy the researching of a location. The first place to start is Google Maps or Google Earth. Go onto the Google Maps and look at the location. Look at anything that's on the site that might be of historical significance or interest. Anywhere that people may have congregated. Certainly here in the UK, I'd be looking out for churches, maybe just over the boundary or very nearby, because those have always been meeting points for people. So people are going to be walking to those places, congregating around those places, potentially losing things on the way. Anywhere that's likely to have had some activity. If there's water, so lakes, ponds, rivers, that kind of thing, they're always areas of interest. People always gravitate towards water sources. The next thing I would probably suggest doing is if you go onto Google and search for side-by-side maps, find a site that does this for your particular area. Quite often you can find a site where you'll have two maps on the screen. It'll work very similar to Google Earth or Google Maps. And you can move around the map. You find your location, and on one side you can change the map to a historical map. You can go back maybe 50 years, 100 years further, and see if anything's changed over that time. There might have been a building somewhere where there isn't a building anymore, and you can maybe pick that as an area to gravitate towards when you're starting to hunt a new location. The other tool I'd suggest using, again online, is something called a LiDAR map, LIDAR. And it's a way of mapping kind of the surface features. Sometimes it'll pick up things which are below the surface that you can't see, and it'll just bring them to light on the map. I'll give you a good example. There's a field on my farm permission which I've been detecting for a long time. Haven't done every area of it. I tried a new area last week and found that hammered coin. I've gone onto the LiDAR map this week, had a look at the LiDAR, and exactly where that coin was, there's a line on the LiDAR that comes out, turns at a right angle, and then goes down towards the bottom of the field. So it looks like there was some kind of a structure there, a square structure, exactly where I found that coin, in an area that I haven't detected yet. So my next hunt going to that location is going to be focusing on that area, that square area in the bottom of the field, to see if there's anything else there, because that could be where that coin's come from. I've also looked at the side-by-side maps, the historical maps, and the ones I've got go back to the early 1800s, the maps I can see, and there's no structure there anywhere from the 1800s onwards. So if it is a structure, there's a good chance that structure's been there previously, possibly from the 1600s where that coin was from. So using all those different tools, I can narrow my search down now to that small area of field and hopefully improve the finds that I get up.
That's awesome, and I didn't know about the LiDAR maps myself, so I appreciate that bit of information. That's definitely going to come in handy, with some of my next hunts as well. Speaking of permissions, we get a lot of questions about, where's a good place to go hunt? Where can I go detect? What's some tips or some advice you could get a beginner for maybe gaining or obtaining some permissions?
Essentially, you just need to go out and ask for the permission. Do some research on the locations, again, with Google Earth. Find an area that you'd like to focus on. So obviously here in the UK, I'd maybe look for an old church, maybe an 11th century church or something like that, and see what's around it. Are there some farm fields around it? If so, who owns those farm fields? Where are they based? How can I contact them? Write a letter, send an email, make a telephone call, even knock on the door. It does take a little bit of bravery, but you can do it, and you may get more no's than yeses, but you won't get the yeses unless you try. The other way of doing it, and the way I've had most success, is actually by contacting people you know and asking if they or anyone they know has any land. My farm permission, which I've mentioned a few times now, but it's an incredible and very varied location, that's come through a friend whose wife has a family connection to the location. So having that kind of connection, you'd be surprised how many people either have or know someone who has land that would be great for detecting on that's never been detected before. There's a local sort of family attraction to me, which again came through a friend. I've got permission to detect on some of the car parks and some of the fields behind it. That came through contact with a friend. I had an 18th century manor over the west of the county a couple of years back. I detected that with a friend, and again that came through contact with somebody else who said, "Oh yeah, my cousin owns a manor house. You can probably come and detect there." So do your local research, find somewhere that might be of historical interest, and just do whatever you can to find a contact and approach them. But don't discount contacting friends. Put something on your Facebook account and say, "Look, I'm a metal detectorist. I'm looking for new land. Does anyone have, or does anyone know anyone who has some land? Maybe an old house, farmland, even private parks, that kind of thing. Does anyone have that kind of land that they don't mind me coming along and doing some metal detecting on?" And you'd be surprised how good that land can be sometimes. So those would be my sort of two big tips on getting land.
Right. And when I first started, it was kind of nerve-wracking to knock on a door and ask somebody's permission to metal detect. But I've learned that the worst thing they can do is say no. So
Exactly.
Don't be afraid to get out there and knock on a door and ask for permission.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't ask, then they can't say yes. If you do ask, the worst they can do, as you say, is say no. And you've lost nothing, they've lost nothing. Move on to the next location and see if you can find anything else. You can always try them again in a year or two. They may have changed their mind. You may have caught them on a bad day, and you can try them again at a future point. But yeah, don't be deterred by no's. You will get yeses eventually. And if you do get a lot of no's and you are struggling to find land, see if there's any clubs nearby, any metal detecting clubs. Quite often there'll be clubs in most areas that will arrange organised digs for groups of people to go to a farm or a particular bit of land and detect there. And not only will you get that land to detect on for the day, but you'll also have a lot of very like-minded people that you can talk to, normally a lot of experienced people you can talk to, especially if you're a beginner, and get some help and advice on settings and maybe some find identification and things like that. And just experience the social side of the hobby, because it's the kind of hobby where you can spend a lot of time alone. And so having that kind of group environment to dig in is also really, really good fun and a good experience.
This is the end of part 1 of our episode with Adam Kearley of D-Tekt Sussex. Please give him a follow on YouTube at his YouTube channel. Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview that picks up right where part 1 left off.